Do you believe the frenzy virus is here in the Eastland, sir?
Gosh, if this is really the frenzy virus, that means Gore Magala
Most
is
likely.
here.
And I speak
Oh,
from experience when I say the risks
yes.
of allowing it to go unchecked are unfathomable.
Oh no. Come on. Come on. Yes! Hello, handsome. Did you miss me?
There you are.
Oh, you're allowed to say you did. Come here! Give me those toes. I need a new pair of boots, buddy. Dragons are awesome. In between writing scripts for lore videos lately, I've been playing some Monster Hunter Wilds, and I've got to say, as a longtime Monster Hunter fan, I am enjoying the game tremendously. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of graphical bugs and stuff, but that's not the topic for today. Today, I am here to gush about dragons, because Monster Hunter Wilds reminded me of just how much I enjoy dragons as a plot device or story device within media. And I want to explain why and why I'm so excited for the future of Monster Hunter Wilds. So first, let's begin. Why dragons? Why do I like dragons as a source of media entertainment so much? Mostly as a kid. When I first learned that dragons are a thing, I was amazed. This idea of a huge, powerful, reptilian animal that was not only dangerous, but apparently intelligent, and I wanted to learn more. And so I did. I ended up reading a lot of books about or involving dragons growing up, and of course, I learned a whole lot about them that way. And in a way, dragons were sort of my gateway drug into high fantasy as a genre. Because the more I learned about dragons, the more I learned about things like the Fae, old folklore, magic, and so on and so forth. I was fixated on learning more about the idea of high fantasy settings because of things like dragons. Which brings me to Monster Hunter. Now, I've been a big Monster Hunter fan for a long time. I wasn't there during the very beginning. I came into Monster Hunter in Monster Hunter 3. You know, the one with the underwater combat. And hot take, I didn't hate it. I just don't miss it, if that makes sense. The idea of fighting monsters underwater in their own environment kind of just made sense to me and I rolled with it, though I can understand why a lot of people absolutely despised it. But yes, I started with Monster Hunter 3 and I enjoyed the crap out of it. Me and Lagaya Chris, we go way back. But it wasn't until Monster Hunter 4 that I really started to love the franchise. Because while I loved 3, I mostly played it by myself. It wasn't until 4 that I had friends that also liked Monster Hunter and I played with them. And that was when I got what I would consider to be like the first real Monster Hunter experience, where you're brawling with your friends in the tavern before you go off to do a hunt together. But Monster Hunter 4 is what released 2 of my favorite things in the franchise. Insect Glaive, which I started maining the moment it released. It's just the idea of having a little bug friend on my arm the whole time as I'm spinning around with a pole arm is just hilarious. And then second, Gore Magala, and its eventual evolution into one of my favorite dragons in all of media, Shagaru Magala. Now, while Monster Hunter as a franchise isn't super well known for having lore or storytelling, it does have a lot of interesting set pieces within its setting, and Gore Magala is one of the biggest ones, as it introduced what is called the frenzy virus. This dragon, this wretched thing which is blind and constantly in a bad mood, constantly uncomfortable, is always putting out this sort of toxic aura, this virulent plague that just wafts off its body the whole time. It is always depicted as like a sort of blackish purple miasma, and this is the frenzy virus. Think of it like Monster Hunter's version of rabies. Any creature that contracts it almost always goes completely insane and starts attacking whatever is closest. And that on its own would make for a really cool monster, a really cool dragon. But the biggest twist about Gore Magala is that this is a juvenile elder dragon. It is a teenager. It is a kid. It is not fully matured yet, which begs the question, what happens when Gore Magala eventually evolves, eventually grows up into what it's supposed to be? Well, my friends, that is when you get an elder dragon called Shagaru Magala, and this is one of my favorite dragon designs in all of fiction. The way the claws on its back rest on its shoulders like shoulder guards, like pauldrons, and this makes the wings on it just glide down its back like a cape or a cloak. It's just radiating regal energy. And then there was the big reveal. It flies up into the sky, unfurls its wings, lets its claws stand on full display, and shines down on you like a sun, like its own star before the fight begins. This got me so hyped back in Monster Hunter 4, and that was on a handheld device, by the way. It wasn't until Monster Hunter Worlds that I actually started playing the franchise on like the big screen. So the idea, the almost promise that we're going to see Shagaru Magala at some point in Monster Hunter Wilds. But what is it specifically about the design of Shagaru Magala that gets me so interested in why it's here in the first place? Well, as I said before, Gore Magala is a sort of wretched thing. It is releasing a virus near constantly. It is uncomfortable, aggressive, like I said, blind. It is this poor, tormented thing that torments those around it. It's this idea of an entity that feels like it should just be put out of its misery. But then it evolves, it matures, it grows, and what's left is Shagaru Magala, this radiant, regal, majestic, and intelligent creature. Notice how Gore Magala is very sporadic with its movements, but when you face Shagaru Magala in Monster Hunter 4, it's pacing, it's observant, it's calculating. There's intelligence behind what it's doing now. It isn't just lashing out at whatever is nearby, it's thinking. Of course, tons of symbolism behind the metamorphosis as well. You could lean into the whole, oh, it's like a caterpillar emerging from its cocoon into a beautiful butterfly sort of thing. But I would take that one step further. I would say that Gore Magala is like the swamp, the fetid and stagnant water of a pile of mud, and yet out of that mud eventually blooms a beautiful lotus flower. The idea that radiance and purity is able to grow out of something so diabolical and infested. Not only is Shagaru Magala's design peak fiction in my opinion, but it's also a great source of symbolism as well. So many different themes you could write around this dragon type, it's crazy. And while there isn't tons of lore for the Monster Hunter franchise, there's enough to paint a sort of picture about why the world is in the state that it is, why you are running into ruins more often than not of bygone civilizations. And if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to talk about that in one of my videos at a later date. Just because I'm more well known for covering Final Fantasy XIV lore does not mean I am not well versed in the lore of other franchises as well. And speaking of Final Fantasy XIV, I understand that some people might ask, well, what do you think about the dragons in that MMO then? Well, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't hate them, I'm just not as impressed by them as I normally would be, mostly because they're not so much dragons as they're aliens. They're from another world, having been chased by a robot across space. That's more sci-fi than high fantasy. That's more aliens versus technology instead of magic and the world. While I don't hate the dragons in Final Fantasy XIV, I'm just not as impressed by them as I would be if they were more rooted in high fantasy instead of sci-fi, but that's my own personal bias. So, long story short, Monster Hunter Wilds has been amazing and has me very excited to fight one of my favorite dragons in fiction on the big screen at a later date. Maybe I'll do a react stream if and when that ever happens. But suffice to say, Monster Hunter Wilds has not only been a really fun game, but helped to remind me why I enjoy fantasy, or rather high fantasy, so much. And all it took was someone mentioning a single phrase: Frenzy Virus, to get me super excited for the future of this game. But since I just spent the last 10 minutes blabbing about my own interest of high fantasy dragons and their representation within media, tell me, my friends, what do you prefer? Are you more of a high fantasy or a sci-fi kind of person? And if you are into one of those things, tell me why. What inspired you to enjoy that thing so much more than the others? Beyond that, I will of course continue to be writing and creating more video scripts. If you enjoy storytelling and lore content, be sure to subscribe and stick around. But until we meet again, as always, stay safe, my friends.